That day, a brutal murder occurred in a small town in the southern United States. The victim, Summer, a real estate agent in her 30s, had her hands bound and had been stabbed more than 30 times. She died tragically in a suburban villa awaiting sale. The person who discovered her body and reported it to the police was her boyfriend and colleague, Will. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the villa to cordon off the scene. The officer in charge of the investigation was a veteran detective named Tom, who had recently moved to the town from Philadelphia. His partner was Dan. The two carefully examined the crime scene but could not find any valuable clues. During the subsequent investigation, a woman living near the villa where the crime occurred provided the two police officers with a crucial clue. According to her recollection, before the crime occurred, she saw a man with suspicious behavior entering the villa where the incident took place. Unfortunately, due to the distance, she couldn't clearly see the man's face. She only saw that he was wearing a hat, driving an old-fashioned car, and had a slight limp. While questioning this female witness, Tom inadvertently noticed a man with long hair and a beard pacing around outside the cordon. But Tom assumed he was just a curious, nosy person and didn't pay much attention to him. After finishing questioning the surrounding residents, Tom and Dan returned to the police station. By then, the forensic doctor had completed the autopsy on the victim. The autopsy results showed that Summer had been stabbed a total of 34 times. The cause of death was excessive blood loss. The murder weapon was an ordinary kitchen knife. The killer's final stab wound struck Summer's pelvis. Because the knife blade was stuck in the bone and couldn't be pulled out, the killer stopped. This suggests the killer either harbored intense hatred for Summer and murdered her in such a brutal manner to vent their anger, or was an amateur killer in a state of panic who frantically hacked the victim to death. Although the forensic doctor couldn't extract fingerprints from the body or the weapon, they did find traces of male bodily fluids inside Summer's body. Aside from the knife wounds, Summer showed no other signs of sexual assault. This indicates she likely knew the killer and had consensual sexual relations with him. Additionally, several strands of blonde wig, not hers, were found on Summer's body. A stain of red paint of unknown origin was also found on her hand. Based on the clues provided by the forensic doctor, Tom determined the next line of investigation was to find the source of the blonde wig and the red paint on the victim's body. The male semen found on Summer's body could be crucial evidence in narrowing down the suspects. Additionally, the police need to focus on reviewing surveillance cameras around the crime scene to see if they can find the old car the suspect drove, as mentioned by witnesses. Tom assigned Dan the task of checking the cameras. He then called Summer's boyfriend, Will, to the police station for questioning. If Summer did consensual sex with the perpetrator, then Will, as her boyfriend, is clearly a suspect. He was also the first to discover the body. According to Will's testimony, he and Summer had been dating for a year and a half. They both worked at a real estate brokerage firm run by Will's mother. On the day of the crime, Will was supposed to go with Summer to the villa for sale to clean it, but due to an unexpected event, he let Summer go to the villa to clean it first. Unexpectedly, when Will finished his work and rushed to the villa, he discovered Summer had tragically died inside. Because Will lacked a clear alibi and appeared quite anxious during questioning, Tom used a lie detector test on him. Although Will passed the lie detector test, Tom still took a DNA sample and prepared to compare it with male bodily fluids found in Summer. However, the DNA comparison results wouldn't be available for several days. Tom had to let Will go home first. Before Will left the police station, he proactively provided a crucial clue. According to him, although he and Summer had a romantic relationship, she still had a husband named Sam, whom she had been separated from for 2 years. Summer was an artist with a criminal record for drug trafficking. Summer had filed for divorce from him, but Sam refused. Their relationship was extremely strained. Aside from that, Summer had never made any enemies. Therefore, Will felt the police should focus their investigation on Sam. After hearing the clues Will provided, Tom also found Sam quite suspicious. Because in America, nearly 60 murderers in cases of married couples were the victim's spouses. Could this be a murder stemming from a romantic dispute? While Tom was questioning Will, Dan carefully checked the cameras around the villa where the crime occurred. The villa was located in a rather secluded area. There were only 2 surveillance cameras around. One of them didn't capture any valuable images. The other only recorded a fleeting glimpse of the suspicious car. Due to the angle of the camera, the license plate couldn't be captured. The camera screen only showed that the right rear wheel of the suspicious car appeared to be missing a wheel cover. Based on this clue alone, it was almost impossible to find the suspect driving that car. In this desperate situation, Tom and Dan decided they should start their investigation with Sam. Following the address Will had provided, they arrived at Sam's residence. Sam lived in a small wooden house in the woods far from town. Faced with the sudden visit from the police, Sam became wary and panicked. He refused refused to let the two officers into the house, only standing at the door and telling them that he and Summer hadn't been in contact for 3 months. He said he was home alone on the day of the crime and that Summer's death had nothing to do with him. After saying this, Sam slammed the door shut. Tom and Dan had no choice but to leave. However, during the questioning, Tom noticed a red paint stain on Sam's right hand that looked very similar to the paint stain on the victim's hand. Because Sam had a prior conviction for drug trafficking, the police still had a DNA sample of him on file. Tom immediately requested that the forensic team compare Sam's DNA sample with the male bodily fluids found in Summer's body. That evening, Tom took advantage of his free time to attend a gathering hosted by Deputy Sheriff Robert, Judy's uncle, with his wife Judy. Through Robert's introduction, Tom, a newcomer, quickly made friends with several other veteran officers at the station. During the party, a jolly officer even gave Tom and Judy a pair of custom-designed keychains as a gift. This jolly officer was Wally, the head of the anti-drug squad. Besides his position at the police station, he also ran a private security company called the Active Duty Police Security Consulting Company. The keychains were a special souvenir Wally had commissioned for his company. After giving the keychains, Wally enthusiastically invited Tom to work at his security company. Tom politely declined. The next day at work, Tom and Dan, while reviewing Summer's personal information, found another suspicious clue. The documents showed that the victim had sold 6 villas in the past 2 years. Logically, she should have received a considerable amount of commission. However, strangely, there were no records in her bank account related to this. They then drove to Will's house to inquire with his mother, Camille. Camille was the owner of the real estate brokerage where Summer worked. According to Camille's testimony, Summer, wanting to avoid taxes, did not directly receive the commission. She had the real estate company use the commission to buy a property for her. Just as Tom and Dan were investigating the situation with Camille, Will proactively pointed out a suspect to them. This person's name was Eli. Eli and Will's late father had a history of animosity. Will's family had been involved in real estate for generations. Many years ago, when Will's father was still alive, he bought Eli's family farm at a cheap price. After the farm was bought, Eli's father unexpectedly committed suicide. Eli believed that Will's father had forced his father to his death, thus harboring resentment towards Will's family. Lately, Will noticed Eli frequently following him. He suspected that Summer's death might also be connected to Eli, possibly because Eli wanted revenge on Will and killed Summer. Based on the address provided by Will, Tom and Dan went to Eli's residence and confronted him. To Tom's surprise, he recognized Eli from before. On the day of the crime, while he and Dan were questioning witnesses, the man they saw pacing outside the cordon was Eli. Faced with Tom's questioning, Eli insisted that he was not the one who killed Summer, but Will. Eli had been outside the police cordon because he wanted to witness Will's arrest firsthand. Tom sensed that Eli seemed to know something. He asked Eli if he had any evidence that could prove Will was the culprit. However, Eli stammered and couldn't utter a word, so Tom offered to collect a DNA sample from Eli, but Eli refused. Unable to get any clues, Tom and Dan returned to the police station. Fortunately, after they returned, a female officer assisting with the investigation provided them with a new lead. She had investigated Summer's call log and discovered that 2 days before the crime, Summer had called the FBI to report a drug-related case. The FBI operator believed the local police department could handle drug cases and advised Summer to call them. However, for some reason the local police department where Tom worked never received any such call from Summer. Just as Tom and Dan were beginning to have doubts about this, that evening, a blonde woman claiming to be Summer's best friend came to the police station. She provided Tom and Gian with crucial testimony. The blonde woman told them that although Summer had been separated from her husband Sam for 2 years, they had been secretly seeing each other. Furthermore, to seek excitement, they frequently visited vacant houses awaiting sale to engage in role-playing games. In addition, according to the blonde woman, Sam was still secretly dealing drugs. Her ex-boyfriend had recently bought drugs from him. Based on this, Tom speculated that the drug case Summer was about to report to the FBI was Sam's drug trafficking operation. If this speculation was correct, then Sam had a much more compelling motive for murder than just a romantic conflict. Just as Tom and Dan were about to corner Sam as their primary suspect, the DNA matching results from the police department's forensic lab came in. The results confirmed that the male bodily fluids found on Summer's body belonged to Sam. This further fueled suspicions that Sam was the murderer. Tom and Dan immediately led officers from the anti-drug squad to Sam's wooden house in the woods to arrest him. Fearing Sam might discover them and flee, Tom and Dan knocked on the door and entered his house first. The other officers lay in ambush in the woods outside the house. After learning the officer's purpose, Sam quickly confessed that he had lied earlier. He admitted that he and Summer had indeed met frequently. On the day of the crime, they had even had sex in a newly renovated house awaiting sale. The red paint stains on their hands were from that process. The male bodily fluids found on Summer's body were undoubtedly left behind by Sam at that time, but Sam adamantly insisted he absolutely did not kill Summer. Tom clearly didn't believe Sam's testimony. He told Dan to stay in the living room to keep an eye on Sam while he went into the inner room. He wanted to search for clues related to the case. In the inner room, he saw a strangely styled 3D painting. The woman in the painting was wearing a blonde wig. These wigs looked exactly like the wigs the police had found on Summer's body. Just as Tom was concentrating on staring at the 3D painting, a gunshot suddenly rang out in the living room. Tom rushed back to the living room to check the situation. He found Dan curled up behind a cabinet. Sam had disappeared. Dan told Tom that Sam had just taken his gun. After Sam seized the gun, he fired at Dan. Luckily, Dan dodged in time and survived. Hearing this, Tom immediately chased after Sam. Seeing Sam attempting to jump out the window to escape, Tom pointed his gun at him and pulled the trigger. A shootout ensued. In the chaos, Sam was hit by bullets, but he still managed to dangle from the window. When Tom followed the trail of blood, he found Sam dead in a shed outside. The police then thoroughly searched Sam's house. A package of drugs had been hit by a bullet during the shootout and torn open. The officer in charge of the drug inventory quickly found a roll of cartoon pattern tape in the house, tightly wrapped the torn package, and then took all the drugs to the police station for processing. Tom was also awaiting processing in a similar manner. Although Sam resisted arrest, was the act of shooting him to death considered excessive force in the line of duty? Further investigation is needed. Robert temporarily confiscated Tom's gun to allow him a few days of rest. During Tom's suspension from police duty, to ease public pressure, they revealed to the media that Sam was the murderer and intended to close the case. But Tom always felt the case wouldn't be that simple. Moreover, since killing Sam, he had been having frequent nightmares. Deep down, Tom was genuinely worried that he had killed the wrong person. After all, to date, there was no direct evidence to suggest Sam was the real murderer of Summer. The suspicious old car mentioned by the witness had not been found. Importantly, Sam's gait was not limping. This completely contradicted the suspect description provided by the witness. In a state of anxious anticipation, Tom finally received the results of the investigation into his case. Fortunately, he was not only acquitted of excessive duty, but also received a commendation from his superiors at the police department for promptly neutralizing the suspect and protecting his colleague. After returning to his post, Tom resumed his investigation into Summer's murder. However, a long time passed without any progress. That evening, while Tom was watching TV at home, a news report caught his attention. The report stated that a young man driving a car had crashed into a private car, causing a traffic accident. When the police arrived at the scene to handle this seemingly ordinary accident, they were surprised to find 13 packages of drugs in the driver's car. Judging from the packaging, these packages of drugs were the same batch that the police had seized at Sam's house. One of the packages still had a cartoon pattern tape wrapped around it. The problem was, these drugs should have been stored in the police department's evidence room. So why were they in the accident driver's car? Could someone within the police department be profiting from the seized drugs? The more Tom thought about it, the more complicated things seemed. Just as he was wondering whether he should question his superiors at the police department about this, he suddenly received a crime report from Will. Apparently, Will's house had been illegally broken into by a mysterious intruder. By the time Tom arrived at Will's house, several police officers had already finished their investigation. However, since the intruder hadn't stolen anything or damaged anything, Tom and the other officers quickly left. When Tom got home, he saw Judy standing in the yard wearing a flimsy nightgown. Judy pointed a gun at a man with long hair and a beard. This man was Eli, who harbored a deep-seated hatred for Will's family. Judy told Tom that he had attempted to break in illegally and that she had discovered him, so she had used the gun to subdue him. She had called the police. Tom immediately handcuffed Eli, then told his wife to go inside and put on a warm coat. He took the gun from his wife and continued to keep an eye on Eli. Eli hastily explained that he had no ill intentions. He only wanted to show Tom some evidence. Eli had recently been investigating Will and his mother. The mysterious intruder who broke into Will's house early this morning was Eli. Eli had copied some documents from Will's computer. These documents were enough to prove that Summer's death was connected to Camille and Will. Tom was extremely suspicious of Eli's words. If Eli had a clue to the case, why didn't he directly provide it to the police instead of sneaking to Tom's house? Eli explained that he had previously investigated Tom and knew his past very well. Eli hoped to give Tom a chance to atone for his mistakes. Just as Eli finished speaking, two police officers, having received a tip, arrived at Tom's house. They immediately escorted Eli to the police station. After Eli left, Tom discovered that he had left behind a USB drive. Due to his recent busy investigation of the case, Tom hadn't yet bought a computer for his new house, so he couldn't immediately view the contents of the USB drive. The next day, after arriving at the police station, the first thing Tom did was use his office laptop to read the data on the USB drive. He discovered that the USB drive contained documents related to the 6 villas Summer had sold in the past 2 years. What's somewhat surprising is that all of these houses are foreclosed properties. Foreclosure refers to houses that have been forcibly auctioned off by the court. These houses were all acquired by a company called Whitefish Property at extremely low prices. After acquiring them, Whitefish Property then commissioned the real estate brokerage where Summer worked to resell them. Summer, as a real estate agent, sold these houses to clients at relatively high prices. It seems that Whitefish Property is exploiting foreclosures to make a huge profit. While this might seem like speculation, it doesn't appear to be a major issue. However, coincidentally, the owners of these 6 villas had all been convicted of drug possession. Their assets were therefore confiscated by the judicial authorities and put up for auction as foreclosures. Could this situation be a mere coincidence? Tom vaguely sensed that behind Summer's murder lay a secret that couldn't be revealed to anyone. To clarify the true history of the Whitefish Company that acquired the foreclosed homes, Tom secretly contacted a former colleague in Philadelphia. The colleague quickly discovered that the Whitefish Company had been deregistered. The available clues were extremely limited, consisting only of an email address previously used by the company. This email address was currently being used by another private security company. This security company was the Australian Police Service security consulting firm. Tom immediately recognized it as the security company founded by Captain Wally of the police department's anti-drug unit. It seemed Wally might have some connection to the Whitefish Company. Although the clues were becoming increasingly confusing, Tom felt he was getting closer to the truth. He then went to the police department's evidence room to examine the 13 packages of drugs seized in the traffic accident. He confirmed that these drugs were indeed the same ones the police had confiscated from Sam's house. But when Tom asked his colleague in the evidence room where the drugs seized from Sam's house had gone, the colleague told him that Wally had taken them away to destroy them. Tom also overheard his colleague in the evidence room that the driver who caused the accident, named Rudy, was a confidential police informant. In the past 2 years, Rudy had reported several drug possession cases to the police. It was unclear why he would also engage in drug possession. After hearing his colleague's account, Tom finally pieced together the chaotic clues in his head and uncovered a terrifying truth. Over the past 2 years, a group of corrupt officers within the police department, blinded by greed, have used seized drugs to frame innocent people. They secretly planted drugs in the homes of innocent individuals, then used drug possession charges to falsely incriminate them. The property of these victims was then legally confiscated by the judicial authorities and auctioned off to a company called Whitefish. This company colluded with the corrupt officers, or perhaps Whitefish itself was secretly established by the corrupt officers. During the auction process, Whitefish manipulated the process and engaged in malicious collusion to acquire these foreclosed properties at prices significantly below market value. Subsequently, a brokerage firm run by Camille and Will used false advertising to inflate property prices, reselling these properties at inflated prices to unsuspecting buyers, thereby reaping enormous profits. Such a complex and intertwined dark industrial chain is absolutely not something Wally could operate alone. Clearly, other corrupt police officers are involved. They coordinate with each other in law enforcement, providing cover for the entire operation. Even within the court system, there may be informants paving the way and facilitating the judicial procedures for asset seizure and auction. The driver involved in the car crash, Rudy, is very likely also involved. He plays some secret role in this entire dark industrial chain, supporting its operation. Perhaps Summer wasn't involved in this dark industrial chain, but during the process of selling her house, she discovered this secret, which is why she contacted the FBI. She wanted to report this criminal gang, but ended up being killed. If that's true, then Sam's death also has other unanswered questions. Perhaps Tom's partner Dan was also an accomplice of Wally. Otherwise, how could Sam have so easily snatched the gun from him? Tom even suspected that he hadn't actually shot Sam in a vital spot, but that the corrupt police officer guarding the house had secretly fired the extra shot. If Sam died, they could frame him for Summer's murder. Thinking about this, Tom began to worry. Could Eli, who had investigated Summer's death and was currently being held at the police station, have been killed? So he rushed to the detention center to visit Eli. The police said Eli had just been released on bail and was probably home by now. But when Tom hurriedly drove to Eli's house, there was no sign of him. Tom suspected Eli had been harmed. At this moment, Tom was extremely worried. He worried that if he continued the investigation, he himself would be in danger. But if he gave up the investigation, he wouldn't have peace of mind. As a police officer, officer. Upholding justice and exposing crime was his responsibility. Tom's move from Philadelphia to this small town actually had a reason. While at the Philadelphia Police Department, he discovered a group of corrupt officers who disregarded the law. He simply lacked the courage to expose their crimes. Torn between these two, he reluctantly asked Robert for help in transferring him to this seemingly peaceful small town. Eli had said he wanted to give Tom a chance to redeem himself. It was clear Eli had investigated Tom's less than glorious past. Eli hoped Tom would be a little braver in this investigation to make up for his past cowardice and truly fulfill his mission as a police officer after a long period of hesitation. Ultimately, Tom decided to reveal Wally's crimes to Robert. Currently, Robert was the only person Tom trusted in the entire police department. Robert was not only Judy's uncle, but Tom was also able to take on the Summer murder case because Robert had strongly recommended him to the police chief. If Robert were also a corrupt police officer, he surely wouldn't have brought trouble upon himself and dragged Tom into this case. The next day happened to be Robert's birthday. Tom and Judy were invited to his house for a birthday party. Other colleagues from the police department and their families were also invited. During the party, Tom quietly called Robert up to his attic office. Tom planned to first hand over the USB drive that Eli had left behind. Then Tom would explain everything to Robert. Unexpectedly, before Tom could hand over the USB drive, Wally entered the office and invited them downstairs for a drink. Tom had to temporarily stop his actions. For the next 2 or 3 hours, Tom couldn't find an opportunity to talk to Robert privately because Wally kept staring at him with a meaningful look. Wally seemed to know that Tom had uncovered the truth. Tom felt a little intimidated by Wally's intense stare. Just then, the beer on the table had all been finished, so Tom took the opportunity to go down to the basement where the refrigerator was located to get another bottle to calm his nerves. Down in the basement, he saw a car covered with a tarp. Curious, Tom lifted the tarp. He discovered an old-fashioned car underneath that looked familiar. The right rear wheel was missing a rim. This was the suspicious car that the police had been searching for all this time, the one driven by the suspect. At that moment, Robert also came down to the basement and saw Tom lift the tarp. Robert covered the car up and declared that it wasn't his, but that he was holding it for someone else. When Tom asked Robert who owned the car, Robert didn't answer, but instead kindly advised Tom not to continue investigating the truth behind Summer's murder. Robert also mentioned that he had a terminal illness and didn't have much time left. He hoped Tom and Judy could live a peaceful and stable life in this small town. After saying this, Robert pulled Tom back to the living room to drink with everyone. It was then that Tom realized that the person he trusted most, Robert, might also be a corrupt police officer. Looking at the people laughing and chatting happily before him, he felt a sudden numbness. Surely, these people were all members of a criminal gang within the police force. Suddenly, Tom remembered a witness mentioning that the suspect in Summer's murder had a slight limp. In fact, there was a male officer in Wally's anti-drug squad who limped due to a leg injury. It was only because the other person was a police officer that Tom hadn't suspected him before. Thinking back now, the person who murdered Summer could very well have been that police officer. Only now did Tom finally understand. The reason the killer brutally stabbed Summer 34 times, causing her to die in agony, wasn't simply out of anger, nor was it the work of a rookie. The perpetrator wanted to disguise it as a murder to vent anger, or because it was committed by a rookie, thereby disrupting the police investigation. The killer, wanting to escape punishment, used such a cruel method to slaughter an innocent person, truly a cold-blooded individual. After the party ended, Tom, with mixed feelings, drove Judy home. Along the way, a police car followed closely behind them. The officer driving the car said he wanted to escort them, but Tom knew this wasn't an escort, but a subtle warning. Judy, sensitive to her husband's unusual emotions, immediately asked him what had happened after they got home. Tom recounted everything about the case to his wife. Before Judy could recover from the shock, Tom suddenly received a call from Robert, asking him to come to his house the next morning to talk. Tom understood the hidden meaning in Robert's words. Instead of directly killing Tom to cover their tracks, the corrupt police group probably wanted to use this opportunity to recruit him. But Tom had no desire to join them. He took his wife to a safe hotel to stay temporarily. Then, Tom secretly went to see Police Chief Marty to hand over the USB drive and explain everything. Marty and Deputy Robert. He normally never associated with Wally's group, so Tom believed he was completely unaware of their despicable actions. Sure enough, after hearing Tom's story, Marty was both shocked and enraged. He said he would go with Tom to see Robert the next morning to talk. The next morning, Tom and Marty went to Robert's house together. Robert was extremely surprised by their appearance. As soon as Marty entered the house, he needed to use the restroom. But while he was there, Robert urged Tom to quickly escape. Robert also told Tom that Marty was the real mastermind behind everything. He claimed that he was only forced to cover up Marty's Marty and Wally's crimes because he needed money for medical treatment. Seeing Tom standing there stunned and disbelieving, Robert suddenly walked towards the stairs, as if preparing to go upstairs to get a gun to confront Marty. Just as Robert reached the top of the stairs on the second floor, Wally, who was lying in ambush on the second floor, shot him. It turned out that everything Robert said was true. Marty was indeed the mastermind behind everything. From the moment Tom gave him the USB drive, he realized that Tom didn't want to be an accomplice. That's when Marty decided to eliminate Tom and Robert and planned to disguise their deaths as a mutual murder. After Tom reacted, he immediately drew his gun and went to the bathroom door. The moment Marty opened the door, Tom, without hesitation, shot and killed him. After Marty died, Tom heard a very faint sound of a gun being cocked. He quickly turned around and saw Wally right behind him. Both sides immediately raised their guns and pointed them at each other, but neither dared to fire. In this tense moment of confrontation, outside the window, a child playing frisbee threw a frisbee that hit Robert's window. The sound of the frisbee hitting the glass startled Wally. Taking advantage of his distraction, Tom fired several shots, rendering him unable to resist. All those involved in the case, including Wally, were arrested one by one. Tom and his wife officially settled in this small town. The film ends here. Thank you for watching, goodbye, and see you again.